So, welcome to everyone watching from wherever you are in the world. This is an interview and a conversation with acclaimed authors Karen Lord, NoureSe Philip, and Sharon Millar. It's titled Thinking Through the Archives. It is part of a larger research project, Caribbean Literary Heritage, funded by the Leverhulme Trust, which engages in and promotes archival research and the safeguarding of authors' papers. For the past 3 years, I have interviewed and had long conversations with Karen, NoureSe, and Sharon around their interest in record keeping, its practice, their creative process, and thinking on their papers. It has truly been a privilege to hold these types of conversations with them, as it is now to be able to share some of the ideas and the issues that we have discussed over time here. Unfortunately, the current COVID pandemic means that we're experiencing globally means that we cannot gather and meet in person, but technology has allowed this dialogue across locations. So we're connecting from London, where I am right now, Barbados, where Karen is, Toronto for NoureSe, and Trinidad and Tobago for Sharon. So in this research, I've been interested in discovering what influences writers' decisions in the process of archiving their work, the decisions they make to either keep or discard records, and the changing nature of record keeping and its impact on the makeup of archives, particularly now with the proliferation of digital media and technology. Which, although it facilitates this conversation and records such as this one, it also brings challenges for future preservation. As digital formats, storage, and technology change rapidly. Drawing from my interviews with Karen, NoureSe, and Sharon, I've also written an essay that examines these themes, which is published in a special issue on archives at the Journal of West Indian Literature. So if anyone's interested in hearing more about this work and conversations, you can find it there as well. I will now introduce everyone. Karen Lord is a Barbadian author, editor, and research consultant. Her debut novel, Redemption in Indigo, won several awards and was nominated for the 2011 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Her other works include the science fiction novels The Best of All Possible Worlds and The Galaxy Game, and the crime fantasy novel Unraveling. She edited the anthology New Worlds, Old Ways, Speculative Tales from the Caribbean. She was a judge for the 2019 Commonwealth Short Story Prize and the 2018 Codebert Award for Caribbean Young Adult Literature. She has taught at the 2018 Clarion West Writers Workshop and the 2019 Clarion Workshop, and she co-facilitated the 2018 Commonwealth Short Story Prize Workshop in Barbados. She has been a featured author at literary festivals from Adelaide to Edinburgh to Berlin, and often appears at the Bocas in Trinidad and Tobago. NoureSe Philip is a poet, essayist, and playwright from Tobago who lives in Canada. She practiced law in Toronto for 7 years before turning to literature full-time. Her 5 books of poetry include the seminal She Tries Her Tongue, Her Silence Softly Breaks, and the acclaimed book-length poem Zong, a conceptually innovative, genre-breaking epic that explodes the legal archive as it relates to slavery. Her 4 collections of essays include her most recent non-fiction work to date, Black, a collection of essays on racism and culture. She is also the author of a young adult novel, Harriet's Daughter, Looking for Livingstone, An Odyssey of Silence, and the play Coops and Calypsos. Philip has received numerous awards, including the Casa de las Américas Prize, the Lawrence Foundation Prize, and the 2020 PEN Nabokov Award for Achievement in International Literature. Sharon Millar is a Trinidadian writer who was born and lives in Port of Spain, Trinidad. She holds an MFA in creative writing, and her short story collection, The Whale House and Other Stories, was published in 2015. winning the 2013 Commonwealth Short Story Prize. Millar has also been awarded the 2012 Small Axe Short Fiction Award. Her short stories have appeared in journals such as Ada, Granta, and Small Axe, and have been anthologized in Pepper Pot, Best New Stories from the Caribbean, Woman Speak, a journal of writing and art by Caribbean women, Trinidad Noir 2, Griffith Review Edition, New Commonwealth Now, Pre-Lit, Caribbean Writing, and Thicker Than Water. Millar is currently at work on her second collection of short stories and her first novel. And my name is Marta Fernández Campa. My work focuses on literary archives and the critical ways in which Caribbean writers and visual artists are engaging with a variety of historical and cultural records and narratives. I am a scholar currently working as Senior Research Associate in the Caribbean Literary Heritage Project, which is led by Alison Donnell. So, first of all, before we start with questions, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you. It's fantastic to be able to gather together after having had over the years interviews with each of you, to be able to continue the conversation that in a way I've been having with you individually, and to be able to do it collectively. It's really wonderful, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
My first question to you is, so we've had various conversations around your interest and motivation and your practices of record keeping over the years. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps speak about that process a little, which I think would be interesting for people to hear about. What was your initial and or current interest in preserving your work, and how has that journey been?
Okay, so two things really changed the way I viewed having an archive as a writer. The first thing was that I was actually asked by a university if I would be interested in donating my papers, and this was really quite soon after my debut novel. So my reaction was, "You're interested in that?" And then as I had a chance to think about it and to let it sink in, I realized that there was a certain amount of utility in not only preserving the papers about my own process, about how these novels came to the publication level, and also just like saving the reviews and so on, which I was doing reflexively. But it was also, I was also in a position where people start giving you books when you're a writer. They just start like handing you books, even if they're self-published, and then publishers want you to have a look at the newest thing and so forth. So I found I had an expanding library that I didn't want just from me. I wanted other people to have access to it. So the conversation I started having with myself was, to what extent should my papers be overseas, and to what extent should they be in the region? And then, of course, the Carib Heritage Project kind of approached me, and I was like, this is a sign to really take this seriously, to really consider the questions. And I'm really just extremely happy that there's been a level of almost guidance and motivation that has come through this project for me and the whole concept of archives.
Yeah, my awareness of my papers going to an archive was something like Karen's. Several years ago, I think I became aware that different writers were sort of putting their papers at universities and so on. And I think I shared with you, Marta, I even went up to York University to see their archives there many years ago, maybe at least 2 decades ago now. But the same question that Karen has just talked about in terms of where. I didn't want my archives and don't want my archives in Canada, and it's a whole long story for that. And the Caribbean interests me, but, I don't know. And I have been recently in discussion with someone from the US about it, and I have my questions about that as well. But my interest has certainly changed over time. Again, like Karen mentioned, I mean, I'm not a hoarder, but I tend to keep a lot of things. And so, for instance, I I have journals going back to when I first came to Canada, which was half a century ago. Um, I wasn't writing then, but it was just something I did to kind of save my life emotionally in terms of what was going on. And so I have that, and when I write, I tend to keep a journal related specifically to the project I'm working on. So I have boxes and boxes of stuff and so on. So it does become somewhat oppressive and overwhelming. And so I really feel the urgency, also given my age, to find somewhere to put them ASAP. Yeah. So if the Caribbean is interested, yeah. Anyway.
It's really fascinating to hear from the writers and to such well-respected writers about your papers, and because I guess I started late, and by the time I was aware of what I was doing, um, I I realized that I had sort of left a footprint on the internet without even being aware of it then. So my process um, has been slightly different in that I first approached the page via a blog, and it's really interesting for me now to look at the person that I was then. This is sort of back in 2005, and not just the person that I am now, but also the change in technology. Um, in terms of journaling or that sort of thing, I felt very almost inept when I first started then, because I didn't really have that much um, handwritten then. I would go to the computer and I typed faster than I wrote. My brain just works differently on the computer. So I've often heard people say that they write better longhand. I'm the exact opposite. It's like my brain goes faster than my hands can write then. So I can't even understand my own writing. But I was thinking about this really hard as well in terms of my papers and my archives. And Karen said something that I'll sort of address here as well. I think it becomes interesting, the books you sort of are attracted to, or the books that you find on your shelves, and in my case also the culling process then, what I choose to keep and what I don't choose to keep. What may have been relevant to me 10 years ago, I say, okay, that's no longer relevant to me. So I now have a bit of a moral dilemma as to, am I obligated to hold on to things to show my process, so as I think I mentioned in prior conversations, I've just done a radical life-changing move where I just had to physically dismantle a library that had been about 15 years in the making. And I was ruthless. And I do suffer some guilt about that, but then I think I'm down to bare bones now, So I guess my process has been slightly different in that way.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's really interesting to having this conversation now, seeing some of the connections that I've also obviously seen through conversations, that I've recorded in audio, but it strikes me that some of the things connecting all of your experiences as well are conversations as well, precisely the sort of speaking with archivists or speaking with other writers, and how that informs, right, that kind of or influences that interest and that motivation as well, and the issue of location as well, right, and the politics as well of location in terms of thinking about depositing your papers one day in an archive. So another, I guess in a way this question connects with another one around the types of materials and records in your papers. And I know that you've mentioned as well, Sharon, the influence as well of, which is really interesting to think about, right? Digital media and technology, and how that influences not only just storage and the record keeping aspect, but also writing as well. But I'm wondering if you can all talk a little bit about what types of materials and records comprise your papers, and also how that may have changed over time, and also to give a sense of the variety of, you know, records that you're keeping that are influencing your work and your creative process.
Yeah, I think I go first on this one. I just wanted to just go back to what we were all talking about there, and I think I should be a little bit more forthright as writers, because we know that we're impacted by so many external events and circumstances, like support, that kind of stuff. And I believe I have shared with Marta, so there's no reason, it's not a secret, that I would have died as a writer in Canada were it not for, you know, my work being read and taken up in the United States. And the reason I say that is because I had dared to talk about racism in Canada. And so the powers that be here, you know, sort of, yeah, I was just disappeared as a writer here. And so that is why I don't want my papers here. Although what's interesting about it is that I couldn't have written the work that I have done anywhere else but in Canada. But that's a whole other discussion. Just because the US has a certain kind of Black history that is not like the Caribbean, and the Caribbean has its own, and the UK has a certain kind of, you know, long Commonwealth, imperial kind of history around writers and so on. So it's a really interesting place to be. And interestingly, what Sharon talking about the computer, you know, again, I shared this with you, Marta. I have never felt comfortable on the computer. You know, I began writing on the, you know, like when I left law, I remember I thought I got to go do a typing course. I got to learn how to type. And I sort of went to this place and I did this, I don't know how long it was, maybe a month typing course. And I'm pretty fast as a typist right now. But so that was several years before the computer. I still have my IBM Selectric, which will probably go into my archives. And I still love it, you know. I would have it here in the room, but I don't have any space for it. The computer has really destabilized me, and I have never found my footing with it. I just think it's a function of age and that sort of thing. So, but having said that, though, there's a lot of stuff of mine on the, you know, you can't help but be there, you know. I've done a blog for a short while. I've posted a lot of stuff on Facebook. So all those things would be being saved. And I know the person I'm speaking with, you know, told me that basically, which makes my job a bit difficult now, they want to see everything. So even things like tapes, like VHS tapes that I thought, well, maybe I'll put those out or try and copy them. He said, no, just leave them. We have the technology to copy them and stuff like that. So it's not good for my hoarding, that sort of semi-hoarding instinct there, because it becomes difficult to know now what to let go of and what not and so on. But I have cassette tapes, VHS tapes, some CD, some DVD stuff, and then of course paper, a lot of paper. And I actually put out a lot of books, like as you mentioned, Karen, people giving you books, and Sharon, giving you books, and I had so many poetry books. And then I was confronted with this problem because they were signed, and so what do I do, And so I'm going to confess, I would sort of tear out that page because I didn't want the person to ever find that their poetry book that they'd given to me. And the U of T has a used book sale every year, so I've put a lot of them there. I think I've covered, but in terms of the impact, the impact has destabilized me, and I still don't feel at ease. And I know I don't use the machines I have to their fullest. I just want something to type on. And unlike you, Sharon, I like some things I must write longhand, but essays and so on, I go to the computer often. I go first because it's a different part of my brain, I think, that's working. Yeah. So it's this kind of mix.
I almost feel like I don't want to repeat myself with things I would have told Marta in conversation, but just to give a little trajectory, a lot of my previous work was really mostly digital, mostly on the computer, a little bit of, blogging and whatever, very minimal because I'm not very regular when it comes to that, but partly because I would move around a lot, whether it was moving mostly for studies or for work or whatever. You end up not really saving a lot of your papers. You end up culling regularly. Sharon, you talked about how you had that big cull after being somewhere for a number of years. Imagine me shifting every 3 to 5 years and culling down each time. And a lot of old books went that way as well. And then when it came to the point where I became a published author, well, there were a couple of things that happened. First, I realized things are not forever on the internet. So if you want to hold on to it, you're either going to have to save the whole page as an electronic file, which can be unwieldy, or print it out. So I have printouts of initial reviews of my debut novel, which is a little odd, but it's a way that the only way that some of them have survived. And then the pandemic hit, and a very strange thing happened to me. I suddenly, backtrack a bit. I started journaling because I was typing so much on keyboards that my handwriting was going to pot. So for my 50th, I treated myself to fountain pen, ink, and journal, and said, okay, let's just do a regular writing practice. Nothing special, nothing authorish, but just to try and bring the handwriting back. But then when the pandemic hit, I kind of became strangely panicked about the idea that the internet was so ephemeral and that I felt so cut off that I just ordered a lot of stationery. And one of the things I ordered was pencils and cards. And I was looking up. Previously, I was all about, okay, what's the archival digital stuff? What's the standards there? And now I was looking up, document inks, archival inks, what kinds of inks and papers are going to last for an exceptionally long time. And it was very interesting how I went back to that physical aspect very, very suddenly. Now, why these cards have kind of saved my life, and this is again a product of the pandemic era, is because I'm doing more stuff by Zoom, especially workshops. And because I don't have a webcam on my desktop, a lot of stuff is done by iPad. But if I'm using my iPad, I can't use it to look at my notes. So I've got now tons of cards that are just handwritten notes from workshop things, for moderating at festivals, what have you. So I'm looking at all of these cards and I'm like, this is now part of the archive. This is now again, stuff that's going to sort of be a sort of permanent record of the various events I did, the various workshops I did, and so forth. And I've actually enjoyed that. I've enjoyed that quite a lot. It's, as you say, basically it's woken up a different part of your brain. And when things are on cards as opposed to on an A4 sheet or what have you, you can shift them around a lot more. It becomes like the original cut and paste. It becomes a way of outlining. And now you can't take my cards away from me. I absolutely live and die by them.
That's so great. Great to hear from both of you in that way, and it makes me realize that I have to make the effort. I guess two things. Just from a practical point of view, I'm left-handed, so if you ever see me write, so I would come out of an exam and I would have ink all the way down just some writing, and so I think maybe that's why I I went to the computer then. But what's interesting is I do absolutely have to handwrite recipes. So I will never write a recipe on the computer ever. But I have books and books and books of recipes and notes to myself and notes to other people and notes to, And I do know that food is a trigger for me on the page as well, that I do write a lot in my work. I access,
You are a true West Indian. That's all I have to say about that.
you know, that I do use work, food as an access point, and landscape gardening, that sort of thing, you know, plants themselves, the actual tactile nature of plants, and the landscape. But I think what was also, and I guess I would be remiss in not mentioning this, I ended up being the last one in Trinidad. I lost my mother fairly young, or I was a young adult. And before she became ill, her parents, she literally everything that her mother left, she just moved into boxes. And my grandfather had actually had a fair amount to do with Eric Williams. He was an independent senator. And one day, before I was taking myself seriously as a writer, if you ever do that, I'm still struggling with taking myself seriously as a writer, every day. But one day I stumbled upon this box of my grandfather's papers, and in it was this incredible collection of the Federation, documents, of meetings. There was actually sort of a handwritten note from Eric Williams for the Woodford speech that my grandfather had sort of made little notes on. And so I got in touch with West Indiana, and then I had this extraordinary duty of curating my grandfather's papers then, which no one else seemed. My mother was an only child. My father was not in the slightest bit interested. My sister was in Miami. And I ended up having to curate his entire collection, which I donated to West Indiana. And then my grandmother was a completely different story. It was different family messages, but on the backs of envelopes. Just really, she journaled, but really strange things. So I then had to curate hers in a very different way for me, because no library's going to want my grandmother's ramblings, but it was very critical to me. So by the time it came to me, I was like, oh, I'm papered out, I'm still finding sorts of key information, and I'm saying to my husband, look at this, what do we do with this? Look at this, what do we do with this? So I think I felt very keenly, not knowing, still exploring my place as a writer then, not knowing who would take responsibility, particularly in the Caribbean, who would take responsibility for my papers, and could I put this on anyone? So when I was first approached by the project and by Marta, I began seriously thinking of saying, okay, well, maybe there are people who don't mind, and I can. It won't be a burden then. I won't. Someone's not going to be left thinking, oh my God, if the place goes up in smoke tonight, everything's lost. So I think my decision to move on to the computer was driven a lot by me inheriting this vast amount of paper that did not even belong to me. But I do understand the importance of photographs, messages on envelopes, things written in correspondence, letters, that sort of thing. And I also am concerned at how much you can curate on the internet. And that has been a major concern for me as well, because when I look at my grandfather's papers and I look at my grandmother's ramblings all over, a million, how to raise a child, how not to do this, how to, I think there's no curating going on there at all. Whereas now I am very aware, and I've become almost self-conscious of the curation that we are forced to do online. So I'm having like the reverse pattern then. I'm now realizing, in order to be completely honest and true to myself and to my work, I sort of have to come off the computer, and start all over again, because the curation is just becoming more and more and more intense because of pressure of the world, whether you have an Instagram page or Facebook, or the ability to disappear things, to disappear correspondence, to disappear anything on the internet, is a very startling thing, you know, and so that has made me rethink. So I guess I'm coming to where y'all were, I guess, a long time ago, but it's taken me a very roundabout. And I'm just gonna have to find a pen that doesn't track all down my arm and all over the page, and you know. I don't know if NoureSe can speak to the challenges of being a left-handed writer, you know.
I was going to say to you that there are left-handed notebooks. Have you ever seen them? Yeah. And so,
My
we
bad is
write
the first world. Not sure where, yeah, we're like, what?
yeah, because, you know, when we write, we drag our arms across the page. Yeah. But
Exactly.
these are set up so that it works like right-handed notebooks with the left-handers. Yeah.
Oh, well, that,
So,
that. Changed my life.
check and see if they're still around. But just a couple of very quick comments to what both of you said. This is so wonderful and exciting. Um, the cards, Karen, like I have notes. I mean, like files full of notes. And so I recently hired someone to help me kind of sort the mess in my office. And so one of the challenges is like, so I have a little book at the side of my bed that I'll write down if it's a dream I have, or, oh gosh, I should call Karen today, I should call Marta, jot those down, I bring it up to my room, and then I don't get to it right away maybe, and so they pile up. But one of the things, just as you've mentioned, some of these have, like this one says, red earth in my veins, nostrils, ears. So they're like mini poems. So now I'm sorting them into just notes and then those that I can use in poems. So it again becomes a whole other thing. And the other thing I wanted to say in terms of archives, I went to a university in the US, and they had the papers of this poet, and her name escapes me. I hope it comes back. She's passed away now. They had one of my letters to her. So they actually had a little, they brought out, they brought out certain things they have in their archives. There was a conference being held and they wanted some of us to come visit. And there was this letter I had sent to, it'll come, and it was asking her if she would either do a recommendation for me for a grant I was applying for, or write a blurb for She Tries Her Tongue. And then there was the little, back in the day when you sent something overseas, for those who were a lot younger, you had to send a little postage coupon, because of course we couldn't buy US stamps here. So you'd buy a coupon and send it to the person. So there was my manuscript with the covering letter, with this little coupon attached to it. It just gave me the chills, you know. It was really quite a beautiful thing to see. I just wanted to share that. And Sharon, you're talking about things from your mother. Like, for some reason, my mother and I had this relationship where she told stories and I listened. I was the one in the family. There are five of us. And she'd write these letters to me about the family and different stories. And 2 years ago, I was in Colombia and I was reading. I sort of took a pack of these letters with me, and she's talking about how when we moved from Tobago, it just opened up this other world, you know, of this woman. And, you know, my dad had come down to Trinidad to teach, and then she was in Tobago and she was joining him, and they traveled with the turkey and the goats, and it was just a whole other. So I want to do something with those as well, you know. Anyway, this is just wonderful. That's all I want to say, and it's just sparking. You know, we're just sparking off each other. It's quite lovely. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you. Yes, I mean, I can see so many connections now, that we're all having the conversation together,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful. And
Keep those notes,
something,
Karen,
yeah,
and keep those letters, Sharon. You can do something with them. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, and it's interesting you've all mentioned as well the influence of family members and other people's archives, right? And records. So in a way, kind of how much expansive the notion of an archive is, which has also been my sense through conversations with writers always, that, you know, the types of records that influence writing in many different ways expand to and extend to many other types of records. I mean, the digital realm or world, for instance, you know, even like bookmarks of websites, but like music, film, but there is also these other types of records, physical records sometimes, that have such a big impact, right, at so many levels to creative process. And yes, it's wonderful to hear. And also, as you were all speaking about the influence of digital you know, digital media, digital technology, but also online environments, and kind of, you know, that role of the kind of archival structure that the internet has, and how sometimes it can be, I know this has come up a lot in conversations, how sometimes that can be counterintuitive, in the sense that it can be quite precarious, as Karen was mentioning earlier. Sometimes links can be broken, and if there's no backup, you know, you can lose material, etc. But in many ways, online and digital platforms, I know, have been very important to you all, to your work and your writing and process. So, and there are various digital elements that I know influence your work, and online platforms have provided important spaces in and around your work. For example, in your websites and blogging, but also through digital archives and projects. I'm thinking right now of NoureSe's online archive of readings of Zong, with Zong Global 2020, the Caribbean Futures Institute, for instance, in which you're involved, Karen, and my Mango Chutneys, Sharon's blog. So I guess my question to you is, what have these digital projects and platforms and media offered to you and others, and how do you see the possibilities of these different online spaces?
So the word that Sharon used earlier, which I think is a good word to use, is curating, because what social media is such a broad term. So I'm going to kind of like, you know, kind of define things a little bit. You know, you do have the public facing things like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, which, yes, you can lock down your account if you wish to, but those are the ones people tend to use more for promotion. But then you have the smaller, more you know, exclusive or curated spaces like Slack, Discord, and so forth. And what I have found to be really beneficial about those spaces is that, well, when you email, there's a point where email kind of breaks down if you just have to be like trying to talk to too many people. Because if you have a project where there's a large number of people involved, and you know, you're trying to send emails out to everybody, there's always going to be people on the edge who don't need to know every single detail, but then at the same time you want them to have access to certain documents, and it becomes a very unsearchable mess. But Slack and Discord are actually very good places for, you know, putting things in thematically, for having resources, links under like one particular area and so forth. So I've started to think of those areas as marvelous little, I don't know how to express this. They're like little private libraries where you can bring in your colleagues or your mentees and so forth, and have a level of control, and yes, of privacy. I don't want to say privacy too loudly in case people think, oh, nothing's ever going to get out, because I think you should always still exercise a certain amount of, we're in a professional space, caution when you're in those areas as well. But you know that it's not just anybody wandering by and looking at what you're doing and you know, sort of looking at it without context, which can be a real problem. One of the things that a colleague did, Tobias Bukel, that really impressed me was he created an online space, a Discord, which was literally modeled on a physical retreat house. So the channels that he opened were channels like, you know, here's a meeting room, here's a common room, here's a patio where you're liming, here's a cafe where you can sit and work with friends. And you know, we actually have a writing room now as well. And to be able to think of this digital space as a physical space where you're wandering in and out of rooms that have particular purposes, and people know, well, if I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to go here. It was actually, it was such a relaxing way and an intuitive way to think of it, and it made it a very usable space. So I'm beginning to feel as if we are like getting the hang of this internet thing. We're learning how to use it and not let it use us. And yeah, that's basically what I have to say with that.
I think that's so interesting. I've written down both names because I guess I started started doing the blog in 2005. I think to test my voice because I was not sure what I wanted to say, and I was not sure what how I'd be received in this space. You know, the Caribbean is very complicated, and I have to address the issue of race and my authority to write from the color of my skin. You know, that's just a fact. And I didn't know what I wanted to say beyond atonement. You know, I felt it was much more complicated than that. You saw the cat, sorry. Much more complicated than that, but I didn't know how to find my voice then. So I began using the blog as a way of finding the cat's tail, as a way of finding myself. And I blogged for maybe, I guess, about 7 years, and it became an online journal. So I blogged all through my mother's death. And I quickly realized the themes that interested me. And then I pretty much shut it down in about 2010 because it was no longer serving the purpose then. I had found my voice and I was ready to move on to fiction at that stage. But really, the most amount of writing I think that I have ever done in one space is on that blog. And that is a main concern to me, that at any point Blogspot, which was a Google domain at one point, they may disappear, you know, they may just drop it. And that's all my work. Or the images, what I was choosing to document, what because I made myself blog every single day.
You know, you should be able to export all that en masse, right?
I've tried, but I've had some tricky things with that. So I have to go back in and try and do it again. Most of it is still there. I can still, but it's a lot of material. It's a lot.
Grab somebody to help you because, sorry, I got a bit of noise in the background, because I think that's really important for you to prioritize.
Yeah, I think so as well, because I still go back in and look. I mean, because I used to have a thing when I was this is completely off topic, but when I was about somewhere between 6 and 9, we had a go of a tree in the backyard, and on my birthday, on my birthday for maybe 3 or 4 years, I would go and sit in the guava tree at a particular spot in the guava tree and sit there for 5 minutes, like at 1 o'clock. I can't remember the time it was, but I remember thinking, okay, I was exactly here this time last year, and I'm going to make it a priority to be here this time next year. And I was very young, you know, and I was doing something similar on the blog as well. And I was doing a lot of travel writing at the time, so I was traveling a lot throughout the Caribbean, and I was documenting cemeteries. I was, you know, exploring history. I was doing everything. And in those days, it was so new and so naive to the internet then, that I was uploading all my high-res images. So I remember, like, if I was traveling for a story or something, I would come back to the hotel room and put my images to upload while I went to shower. And then once the images got up, then I would sit down and write the blog. So I mean, it was a daily journal for something like 5 years. At the moment now, that just seems completely scary to me. You know, it goes to show how the online environment has changed so much. You know, I mean, I'm gradually moving off of the computer, moving off of the internet. So I'm actually really happy to hear of, you know, hear of places that like Slack and Discord that provide these sort of safe rooms, because I don't think that before, I would say maybe it's all ramped up in the last 5 years. you know, that people have to actually say this is a safe space in more ways than one, but often very much online. You know, people will say this is a safe space. And like, well, what do we mean by that? And why do we have to say that? The very fact that you're saying this is a safe space is usually a red flag to me that it's most certainly not a safe space then, and it's an uncurated space, and it is a space without context, and it is a space where people who perhaps are on the sidelines. And I just want to say to NoureSe, thank you so much for coming out with the ripping out of the signature, because I was like, that was my guilty secret. I was like, oh my God, rip. You know, so I mean, but obviously you have to do it, you know. But I think one of my other guilty secrets, I guess, is, you know, just going silent for a while, just to stop the chatter in my head, you know, just going silent. And I'm saying, as a writer, am I obligated to, you know, to curate, you know, am I obligated to document? Am I obligated to do this? Because I feel I'm at this point now where I need complete silence to concentrate, you know. And I'm going to say something as well that perhaps is not something that is discussed, but I'll just talk about it as well. When you become a writer and you get a certain amount of attention or anything, as I'm not sure if this was unique to me, or I'm sure it's not, you discover that there's a parallel world of people who really want to be writers and are very opinionated, and they take up a lot of space and time, but they're not actually producing any work, you know. And they often cluster to literary festivals. They are often masked as reviewers. They are often, but they can take up a tremendous amount of resource, time, space, energy, conversation, you know. And I think for me, I just needed to get right back to ground zero, silence, me, and either the because I see Kai Miller has a new collection. He's just launched his new collection of essays, and I think it was launched yesterday or something. And I saw the blurb. I didn't get a chance to see the whole launch, but he talks about the terrible white space, you know, and I understand that totally, you know, this facing of either the computer screen or a page. But I just feel it's between me and the terrible white space now, you know, and all the implications that go with that. As usual, I'm all over the place, but I hope any of that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's lovely to hear those reflections. I'm thinking about, I read somewhere that Susan Sontag, I think it was her son, anyway, someone involved with her estate actually gave her biographer complete access to her computer. Yeah, so I just, you know, I'm just sharing that with both of you. And just to say that, and this is for myself as well, to make sure that you have, or you're thinking about who your literary executor would be. I know you guys are younger than I am, but because it's in...
You can die anytime.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. When you have achieved your 70, everything is grace after that, right? The biblical 70. It's in that person's hands, or those people's hands, that are going to decide, you know, who has access to what and things like that. So I think that's really important to remember. And yeah, thank you, Karen, for that link there. Slack. I'll talk to you more about that in Discord. That's really interesting. I mean, I don't have much else to add, you know, beyond, you know, as I said before, the computer is still foreign territory to me, although I use it quite a lot. Blogging during COVID and during the uprising last year, not blogging, but Facebook actually was very good for me, because I would write pieces and just post them there. It was a really important space to manage a lot of emotions and feelings. And what I often do when I write those pieces, I often intend to use them later on, so they become almost like a trial run for something. and I'm in the process of working on something where I'm looking at some emails that I sent during that time, and just finding a lot of interest in. Some of them are, most of them are quite short, maybe a small paragraph or something, but I'm finding that of great interest, and that's something I want to collate and use in a publication. Yeah. So that's how, I sort of have this uneasy relationship with this behemoth. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's something actually that has come up in our conversations, which is the sort of the potentialities and also the weariness around the internet, or particularly social media. But it's interesting as well to see and hear about, with you, Sharon, the form of the blog, right? And how it's sort of changed. And today, one of the platforms that's used most often would be Facebook as well. And as you were mentioning, NoureSe, right, the idea of Facebook posts is kind of places as well to test or to share or to kind of develop as well writing. And it was wonderful as well, having seen those as well last year and seeing the impact as well, particularly last year with the uprising and the Black Lives Matter movement after the killing of George Floyd, to see the impact as well of sharing the work and in that space as well.
Can I just add something, or maybe it's a question to my new friends and colleagues. I seldom use Facebook, and the reason why I say that is because, and it's there in the research. When you go on Facebook and you come off, you feel worse than when you went on. It has always been the case with me. Much as I want to see my friends and colleagues, and even those I don't know, doing well. I mean, it takes a lot for me to post. I don't know if I've ever posted anything personal on Facebook, really. Do you know? And I just wonder, and plus I don't trust this instrument, which is, as a writer, it's really amazing that this is the thing I have to use to get my work out there. It's like last night. I know I printed these things off last night. I was doing emails. I wrote an email 3 times. It didn't go. For some reason, Macmail just stopped sending my emails. It's like, whereas I know if I sat with my clunky IBM Selectric and hit those keys, it would be there. I would have to be crazy to type with no paper in it, So, I mean, I know that sounds really kind of silly and basic, but it's at that primal level for me, because I think for me, that's where I write from. And I don't trust this. I don't trust this technology, really, in a very profound way.
What you're talking about is important, the idea of trust. And Facebook is an excellent example, because Facebook came out when I was finishing my PhD. It was when it was still limited to universities. When I signed up for Facebook, I was thinking to myself, as a person in the final year of their PhD, well, this will be a good way for me to keep in with my academic networks, to keep track of my colleagues and so forth. So my Facebook, if it still existed, would have all these pictures of me, like, at the university chaplaincy, hanging out with my friends and just in a very kind of casual way. Now, of course, Facebook went through so many changes and iterations, and it was like every time there was a new term, new terms and whatever to look at, because they were opening up in ways you didn't expect. So what I joined was a closed environment for a very specific purpose, and what it morphed into was something entirely different. And especially when you as an individual change what you're doing, where as an academic, there were things I was happy for my colleagues to see. As a writer, there's things I don't want to be seen in public. So I did, in fact, just like close off my Facebook page eventually. I didn't even need the push of the propaganda and the political, confusion that they were helping to instigate. But it does say to me that if you have a tool, if you have, whether it's an app or a machine or whatever, it needs to be very clear what it's doing for you and and whether it's fulfilling that purpose. What has worked for me in terms of technology is that Give me a tool that says precisely what it means to do, let it fulfill that purpose, and I will stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
The moment it starts trying to be more or go down a different direction, or the moment I realize, and this is the key thing, I'm a starving artist. I like things that are cheap or free, but I always remember somebody saying, if something is free, you are not the customer or the client, you are the content, you are the product that's being sold.
Yeah.
I do not like the idea that, so even when you say Facebook is a place to test things, I became at some point really extremely cautious about putting my fiction online. It has ramifications for, as a fiction writer, for if people are going to publish you. It also has ramifications of, if you're scared of somebody like taking that particular clever paragraph you wrote and using it in their own work.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things start happening. So you begin to understand that you don't want to be on shifting ground when it comes to any program, app, or technology. You want it to do exactly what it says, and the moment it stops doing that, you want to be able to lead it cleanly with all that is yours. So I don't think that's a matter of age or ability or whatever if it terms of technology. I think it is actually a very sensible gut reaction that you're having to a practice that in a way is just like unethical in a way,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, we'll lure them in to the gingerbread house when we got the oven heated up and ready.
I agree entirely. And I love that analogy of the gingerbread house, because I do feel as if I've been roasted in that gingerbread house.
Mm.
I've had some really, really rough experiences on Facebook, really bad.
Oh, wow.
Terrible. I mean, to the point where I still have stuff that was taken down because it was so inflammatory then. But I have it all screenshotted and saved. And I was thinking the other day, for what, But the problem, and I've discussed this with my daughter, is, I think we're all on the same, excuse the pun, same page here. Where we all feel that we have to go back to that primal space. And in my case, it's reading, where I get to that almost dreamy, it sometimes maybe take 2 to 3 hours of reading, uninterrupted concentration that, we didn't realize when we were children that we would not always be able to get to that space when you could read for an entire day and no one would bother you, no one would look for you, no one would call you, and I realized for me that still is the drug, that I have to, my brain, for every hour that I write, I have to read for 2, because I have to change the brain patterns, the brain waves, everything. Mm-hmm. And it's a safe space. It's me and the book, whatever I'm taking in. But my daughter, she's 24, and of course she knows all about influencers, and we can't ignore them. People become overnight celebrities.
Sorry, I just need to cut across and say that initially when you said influencers, I heard influenzas, and somehow I don't want to separate the two words anymore. I think that the fact that they're both contagious and possibly deadly.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I thought. I thought she said influenza, and I thought, oh no.
Is it Trini accent? It's like,
no, but I think what Karen is saying makes sense. Yeah,
I think it makes absolute sense. I think
the viruses.
I think I caught the Spanish flu before COVID, honestly, because on Facebook. Because let me tell you exactly, influenza, same khaki pants as far as I'm concerned. Both kill you dead, or have the potential to kill you dead. But the thing is, these people do exist, and they exist often with very little credentials, except some charisma and a camera, and they have the potential to destroy or take to the top, which I don't think that has ever been the case. In the literary world before this. I mean, of course, there were always,
patrons,
the all white brigade, the all white male, the male gaze, the white male gaze, that controlled publishing for centuries. But what we're seeing now is anything could come from left field at you, and if you get under the sights of an influencer, they can destroy you. you know, and it's like, well, how do you navigate that? You know, how do you navigate that as a writer where our job
I
is to put things on the page, and you're going, well, you know, we had a conversation about this when we last spoke, the three of us, about context.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know, and it's things like, you know, I really only feel secure when my stuff is published in a book and I have a publisher. But just to leapfrog here for just one small second, on to go back to archives a second. I have a very small publisher. I'm publisher People Tree, so they're a little dynamo. They are, but there is a possibility that one day my book will be out of print. So I said, you know what I need to do now? Not that I make anything in royalties, but you know, anything that's coming in, then I need to start buying my own book, because it's going to be gone. You know, if People Tree folds, I don't think they'll fold, but the book's not available. You know, it's available on Amazon, but that's an online platform. It's available in one or two small bookstores, but it's certainly not marketed the way large publishers can market that, you know? So as part of creating my own archive, I am now thinking that I'm actually going to have to buy myself a collection of my own books, so that when I'm dead and gone, there'll be proof that I did write, you know, at least my first collection, you know? So yeah, I've jumped all over the place as usual.
No, I was going to say, I think that having your own books, having you know, every edition, every translation, every whatever is still necessary. I guess I don't feel as, I do feel bad when a particular edition vanishes, because you're like, shoot, I never had that. They sold French translation rights for one of my books, and the publisher instantly went out of business. And I never even got an author copy, and I was so upset. But fortunately, my agency managed to track one down, and they're keeping it for me until COVID actually allows us to either travel or send things safely. But I understand very much that feeling of, I need to have these little markers, this evidence, this tangible part of the collection. Absolutely so. But you know, I always say, ultimately, go to print, all rights revert back to me. This book will never really disappear as long as I own it. Even if I choose to release it as an ebook, even if I choose to find another publisher, it'll never disappear. So I'm all for, have your, what they call it, a brag shelf, but never feel as if your work will disappear, because you're still going to have power over it. But the other thing you said, hang on, backtrack. Oh, you're talking about influencers, yeah. I think, and this is an unscientific statement, that many writers are introverts and fewer are extroverts. So they're definitely nothing. What we're saying is not going to work for all writers, because I have a feeling that we are more to the introverted side. We do want the silence. We do want to face that white space, that blank screen or that blank page, and kind of have a communication going on with it. And we are not as, I mean, it is always lovely to be able to interact with readers, but I don't crave it. Sorry, I don't crave it. And the kind of idea that people have that, well, you have to have a presence and you have to be able to like have almost like a fan base. To me, that's celebrity. That's not writing. And it's not new, because I mean, you know, go back to Dickens and Twain and the rest of them, and they were doing all kinds of speaking tours and whatever, and keeping themselves visible and recognizable in the public gaze. So it's a question of degree and method, but it doesn't really change. But you can make, I guess you have to make a choice as to what you want it to be. Anything that interferes with my writing, I don't have to do it. Because ultimately the source of why I'm in this position is, can I sit down and write and produce something that I'm ultimately content with, if not necessarily thrilled about. And if I'm doing something that drains my energy, that upsets me, that causes me to feel as if I should be in another occupation whatsoever, then I have to cut it out. So I do a lot of not engaging with people. To give an example, in my community, I'm going to make this purposely vague. There was a writer / reviewer who made it a habit of, shall we say, being very provocative, very, you know, oh, this person has written this badly and this is problematic and so on and so forth. And when when they turned their attention to one of my books, my reaction was to completely not engage. And a couple of colleagues of mine came in and said a few things, and I sort of watched them on Twitter for a bit, and I was like, don't bother. Because ultimately, this person is a bad reviewer. They're not a negative reviewer. They are a bad reviewer. They don't really engage in the content. They just want to be controversial. Why would you want to give them oxygen? Just don't. Some people can't hold back. Maybe it's the extroversion or whatever. They're like, no, I want to go in and fight. I'm like, suit yourself. Don't bring me into it. I don't need this. This is the stuff that stops me from writing. This is the stuff that takes away my energy and my oxygen. And I cut that out. If there are people who need to have that because they feel it raises their celebrity and it raises their profile, they can knock themselves out. But I don't need to be a part of it. So, it's the sort of the not caring thing kind of serves me well. I mean, it's like basically when you said, raise your children in peace. I feel that can be extended to so many areas in life. It's like, you do you, but I don't have to know about it. I don't have to participate.
Yeah. I mean, years ago, I decided that I wouldn't read reviews of my work, good or bad. I just don't read them. Because if they're good, then it kind of pumps me up. If they're bad, then I get pissed off and upset. So, I'd rather, maybe a year later I might look at them or if I'm putting them together, but I don't read reviews. I don't want to know. Yeah. Yeah. This has been so wonderful, Marta. It's just really,
You.
I hope I can stay in touch with both of you.
I hope so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to talk to you guys about Slack and Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel I really
And
need to back on Discord, huh?
yeah, Sharon, I'm coming to see you when I come to Trinidad next.
Yes, no, definitely. It's been absolutely wonderful because, as I say, there are not many people that get what we do,
Yeah.
and we don't often get a platform to discuss what we do in this way at this level, and the whole issue of archives, and we've discussed archive, but we've also discussed our personas as writers. And I think of this writer, Elena Ferrante. Not sure if any of you are familiar with her, but she just, I have no idea how she's done it. But I think of the freedom, if you could just separate the work and not have it mix or commingle with your day-to-day life, or you have to keep defending it, or you get on a stage and people question you instead of interrogating the work. And I just think what she did, how she's managed to do it, I have no idea.
What's her name?
Because I think Elena Ferrante.
Oh,
She
Elena.
writes
Oh my God.
Elena Ferrante, yeah. Elena Ferrante. And but it's fascinating me that she has, in this day and age of the internet, I'm sure she has a huge archive because somebody's taking care of it. I'm pretty sure, but she has remained anonymous, which means that a lot of these things that we are grappling with now, a public face, how that contaminates our creativity. She's just gone, no, I don't need the publicity. I don't, which I think when I was talking earlier about coming back to going in the opposite direction I was heading in, and then I'm retreating. I now write for myself. I also do it like for entertainment for me, and I think, all right, if no one ever sees this, it's okay. Hopefully it will live beyond me, but I feel then it takes a considerable pressure off of what I think people think I should say, what I think people want me to say, what I think people, censor me, or people dictate that I should be this mouthpiece or that mouthpiece. If we could just be anonymous, it would be great. So she's just someone I thought I would throw in at the end here because, she's somehow just managed to do what seems to be the impossible.
There's something else I want to say really quickly. I'm sorry, no time is getting away, but we basically talked about the ancestors, the ancestors being with us, and in a way us channeling their stories. And I was very, very struck. We had the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent recently, and heavy ashfall came to Barbados. And at the end of the press conference with our Prime Minister, who was guiding us through a very scary moment of, tons of ash still to be removed and so forth. They had a reading, which had been done about a year before, of a poem by Kamau Brathwaite called The Dust.
Mm-hmm.
And this was about the St. Vincent volcanic eruption of 1902, which would have been, we had one in 1979, but it was not quite as dramatic, but that one was on par with what we had today. And it was in the voice of somebody who had gone through it. And of course, without the warnings, it would have been an apocalyptic event with sky darkening and all these things happening. And in that moment, I felt such relief and pride for what I do, because I said, it's about the stories of the ancestors, but it's also about a conversation with our descendants of the next generation. Mm-hmm. It's that intergenerational conveying of like this, coping mechanisms, and this has happened before and this will happen again, and we got through it, and everything else that we need to be able to just like help ourselves through these various traumas. So I just suddenly felt in that moment that what we do is so powerful, that mm-hmm. while we are still very much trying to eat from day to day and worrying about our readership and our marketing, I think that also we are very much aware of who's going to be reading it after we're gone. How is it going to help those who are going to be around when, all the events of today are just some little distant piece of history. So I just wanted to say that that's the connective tissue for me. Mm-hmm. Those who lived before us and those who will live after us.
Because we are the ancestors in making.
Exactly. Thank you, ancestors in the making. Exactly.
Thank you so much to all of you for your generosity, today, and this conversation, which has brought so many, different connections, and I feel like new ideas. So, even though we have touched on kind of familiar themes and questions, I think, thank you. I wanted to say.
It's been really rich and
thank you so much.
Thank you, all of you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.